Welcome to Disconnected. This video is very, very, very close to my heart. I've been saying this for a very, very, very long time. I grew up in South Africa and we've seen our fair share of protests to change government policies, and it always struck me that even though it sometimes goes way too far, protest is such an integral part of managing your government. Because let's be clear, most people don't protest against things that are fine. They protest against bad decisions by governments, or for all sorts of reasons that are usually on the right side of history. And I've always felt like the state of Britain, and especially the last 10 years, I would say, it's only the British that don't really get up and stand up and en masse say, no, fuck you, government. And it's really necessary, because especially at this point in time in our history here, we really, really need to stand up to this government. Obviously, we do have protests, but they're nothing in the scale, and they're usually about specific issues. More, let's take the Just Stop Oil, for example. And then at the same time, the government goes and actually finds ways to try and legally stop protests by all sorts of debilitating factors. But the French, go for it, guys.
I love the smell of La Révolution in the evening. The French have had enough. They're kicking off big time. As Emmanuel Macron, who's the French president, and also the poster boy of centrist dads the world over, as he attempts to hike the pension age from 62 to 64, up to 3.5 million people, that's about 1 in every 20 French people in France itself, have taken to the streets. It's gotten so bad that a visit by King Charles III has been cancelled or postponed. I mean, to be fair, from historical experience, it's not necessarily a great idea for a monarch to swan around France while its population are feeling a little bit on the agitated side.
Yeah, and maybe going to visit Bastille. I don't know.
Right? But let's not lose our heads. Seriously though, it does seem as though the French authorities have actually gone, maybe having a king in full pomp while there's a mini uprising taking place isn't necessarily the wisest or most astute of moves. Now, hundreds of thousands have marched through Paris, the town hall in Bordeaux, who was set on fire, and the police have been firing tear gas pretty liberally at protesters. Now, firefighters are amongst those who've been marching for their pensions. Vast crowds have assembled across the country. The trade union federation, the CGT, have taken a decisive role. There's been a pretty joyous and determined atmosphere shown at many of these protests. Riot police, meanwhile, have been dishing out brutality on a pretty gruesome scale.
One of my friends told me.
Now, I want to put a challenge to all of us. Let's just look at the UK, shall we? The UK already has its state pension age rising to 67. Not a peep. Nothing. Not even a whimper. While the French they're kicking off at their pension age being hiked from 62 to 64. They've got masses of people on the streets kicking off in quite a courageous and revolutionary way. Now, it gets worse for us in terms of how this reflects on us, because our pension, let alone the pension age, our pension sucks in comparisons to many other rich countries. So 4.7% of our GDP, that's our gross domestic product, our economy, is spent on pensions. You can add 1.4% for pension tax relief on top of that. In France, the total is nearly 12%. That's how much they spend on pensions. Now, we're lower than Germany, Italy, Denmark. 15.5% of our pensioners live in poverty, compared to less than 4.5% in France. So we've got lower pensions and a higher pension age, the worst of both worlds. Now, the French are kicking off, so why aren't we? What's all this about? What does this say about, I don't know, how we've landed in the mess we're in? I'll come on to that, because what this brings to me, I think about this tweet a lot. It was a tweet that a journalist sent out last summer, and it showed that France had practically the lowest cost of living increase for its poor citizens than almost anywhere else in Europe, whilst in Britain the poor suffer a much bigger cost of living increase than France, and the rich here are far more protected in comparison to the poor. So the rich cost of living increase is much lower than it is for the poor. That's class war, by the way, summed up in a graph. Now, he asked this journalist, another one of those charts which makes you wonder why the French are always so angry with the government. But maybe just link the two facts. That's the whole point, isn't it? It's the fact the French are so determined and so prepared to fight back and stand up for their rights. That is why you end up in France with a lower cost of living increase for the poor, because the government are scared of its people.
I think that's the point. That's the reason I wanted to showcase this video, because my thoughts on this are exactly the same. You absolutely get the government you deserve, and that basically means like you have to hold them to account. You have to vote for the people that you think are going to serve you best. If those people don't serve you best, then you take to the streets and you make sure that they do. And there are many ways of doing that. You can protest. There can be petitions, you name it. But what is important is that you actually do something about it. And when you do something about it, it has to be in their masses. Because the thing that I find weird is the UK, the people, I don't understand why they don't. Because for all intents and purposes, the UK has this facade of being this, first world Western country, capitalist, freedom, democracy, all this sort of shit. But it's actually, if you really look at it, it's not true. You have people in government that you didn't vote for. You've got ministers, MPs, you've got prime ministers who are all in it for themselves. They're all career politicians. On the face of it, everything kind of looks okay, but you just scratch the surface just a little bit and you realize the inequality and that people are really treated unfairly, the population, to a degree, if you compare it to countries that we should aspire to be like. There is so much room for protest here to make this country better. It's a bit like somebody was saying, like, America isn't the greatest country, but it should be. I think the UK is pretty much the same. It's one of those countries who realistically should be one of the greatest countries, but it isn't. And part of it, I think the biggest reason is because the people delusionally trust the government. They delusionally think that they know what they're doing and that it's okay. And then there's also this ingrained class thing of because they're richer and are powerful, they are the ones who should be making the decisions. And it's time that the people actually realize, no, they are the ones who need to make the decisions. And if they don't like a government, they need to, then they need to shunt them out. And they need to shunt them out fast, not wait for the next election when just the opposition takes over and does exactly the same thing again. That we really change from the ground up, from the grassroots, the politics in this country to be more inclusive, to be more fair. There is so much that can be done. And I'm not a big fan of French, but I must say, when it comes to these things, you have to look up to them and say, yeah, go on, go on, get it done. And maybe take some examples from them. Thank you very much. Check out Owen Jones' channel. It's an absolutely great channel. And comments down below. Thank you very much.